Hey, welcome back to the channel. We are in the kitchen today. I'm going to show you a fun new recipe that I found recently for homemade sandwich bread. Are y'all tired of buying these? I'll tell you what, the last 3 or 4 trips that I've made to Walmart to get these, the shelf tag says one price and my receipt says another. They continually overcharge me for bread. It's not a lot, but it adds up. So I got tired of it. Plus these are full of preservatives. So I found a recipe for homemade sandwich bread using only 6 ingredients, okay? Yes, there is a 7th one down here, melted butter, but there is butter already in here, so it's technically only 6 ingredients. I will put a picture of the recipe here. Now, we're gonna get started. I'm gonna get the water going, the yeast to bubbling. From this point out, I'm going to do a voiceover because it is just super noisy in this house today and nobody will be quiet. So we're gonna do a voiceover and then I'll come back at the end and show you what the bread looks like when it's done. Okay, the first thing that you're gonna need is some lukewarm water. I just use water straight out of the tap. I don't warm it on the stove or microwave. You're gonna use, first off to start, 1 cup. The recipe says 1 2/3 cup divided. So you're gonna start off with the whole cup in the bottom of the mixing bowl. And then we are going to add to the lukewarm water 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. This is not instant yeast. I'm sure there's probably a conversion if you would look it up on the internet for what it would be if it was the instant yeast or how many packets it would be. But if you're using the active dry, it is 2 1/4 teaspoons of that. We're going to put that in. And then the next ingredient is 1 teaspoon of regular sugar. You got to have the yeast, give them something to eat. And then we're going to whisk that all together, get it good and dissolved and all mixed in and incorporated. And then that is going to sit for about 10 minutes. The recipe says 5 to 10 minutes, closer to 10. I just set a timer for 10 minutes. Then when that timer is up, you can see it is nice and frothy and foamy, and it is time to continue. So we're going to put in that other 2/3 of a cup of the lukewarm water, straight from the tap again. Add in the rest of the water. And then we're going to do a tablespoon of sugar that I had just pre-measured out so I could put the sugar bin away. And then we are going to do 1 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to add in 1 1/2 tablespoons of unsalted butter that has been cubed up and is at room temperature. I just cube it up before I start and then I let it sit while I'm getting everything ready, and it's pretty soft by that point. Dump all those little butter cubes in. You need your dough hook attachment, and then the last ingredient is 4 to 4 1/2, depending, cups of all-purpose just plain flour. This is 4 cups that I've started with. Always start with 4. It may need more than that and it may not. I ended up not needing any more, but in case if you need more when it begins to mix together, if it begins to stick to the sides of the bowl, then you can just add in a tablespoon at a time if you need to keep it from sticking to the sides of the bowl. Then you're just going to mix it together until a soft ball, kind of dough ball forms, until it's soft and it's not sticky if you don't need to add any more flour in. Once you get to that point, set a timer. It's going to look like this. See how it's not sticking to the bowl, it's not sticking to the bottom or the sides. Let it stir together really good. Make sure there's no dry flour clumps in there anywhere. And now you're ready to start your timer. And I set mine for about 8 minutes. The recipe says continue letting it knead for 6 to 9 minutes. And then just walk away, do something else. Fold a load of laundry, whatever you need to do. About halfway through, this is what it looks like. It's kind of noisy. But let the mixer do the work. It's so easy. You don't have to stand there on a countertop and knead and knead and knead. Just let the mixer do the work for you. Then at the end of that 8 minutes, you're going to spray or grease or oil, whatever you want to use. I just used plain old vegetable cooking spray. Spray a bowl really well, and then you're going to put just with that vegetable oil spray is what I used. Then you're going to stop the mixer, get all the dough out. It shouldn't really stick to anything. It comes off pretty easy. It might be a tad bit sticky, but it's not a big mess. And you're just going to take the dough off the hook and out of the bowl, out of the mixing bowl, and then just put it in that greased bowl. We're going to cover it with a towel, and you're going to let it rise in a warm place for 45 minutes. So what I do is at this point, while it was mixing for those 8 minutes, I turned my oven on to 200, and as soon as it got preheated to the 200, I turned the oven off, and then I just stuck it in the oven just like that and cracked the door open, and then set my timer for the 45 minutes rise time. Just like that. Now, at the end of the 45 minutes, you're going to need to get your loaf pans ready. This recipe makes 2 of the, I think it's 4-inch by 9-inch or 4-inch by 8-inch loaf pans, or you can do the great big long regular size sandwich loaf pan. Grease those 2 loaf pans before you get going. Now, there is no more kneading going on. You do not need to turn the dough out and knead it, but you do have to turn it out and separate it out and get it rolled up. So you're going to lightly flour your surface, dump the dough out of the bowl onto the countertop like that. And then I just put a tiny bit of flour on top just because that top part right there that was touching the bowl is fairly sticky. So just go ahead and make sure it's not going to stick to anything. It was super sticky, so I grabbed a couple of tablespoons of flour and just lightly dusted it. And then you're going to cut this dough in half because it makes 2 loaves. And then each half you are going to press out with your hands. You do not need a rolling pin for this. I love it. It's very little mess, very little effort on your part because it's basically you dump everything in the mixer, let the mixer do the work, and then this is the only real hands-on that you have to do. This is the only flour mess on the countertop. You're just going to press it into a rectangle, roughly an 8 by 12-ish size rectangle, and kind of press out any air bubbles that you may find with your fingers like this as you go. And then once you get it all kind of square, it doesn't have to be perfect, just start rolling it up fairly tightly and just roll it all into a log. Make sure there's no air bubbles that you find, because that's what makes the holes in the loaves of the bread. And then you're just going to make sure it's all kind of squished together. Fold the 2 ends underneath like this, and make sure that top is nice and taut and kind of pulled, stretched tight. And then you're going to set it into the loaf pan. And then you're going to do the same exact thing with the other half. Get it all stretched out into the loaf pan. And then the next step is very easy. We're just going to clean up this countertop. And then we are going to just put that same towel right over the tops of these loaf pans, and they are going to rise for another 45 minutes. I did half of the time right here on this countertop. The other half of the time, I moved them over to the stove top. And then halfway through the rise time, I set the stove to start preheating to 390 degrees. And then once they were done at 45 minutes, this is what they look like. And you want your rack to be on the middle to lower end, not the very bottom, but not right in the middle either. Put them in there, and they bake. It says anywhere from 25 to 30 minutes, so I set my timer for 28. And then today I ended up checking them at the 25-minute mark, and this is what they look like at 25 minutes, so I went ahead and pulled them out. So they look beautiful. You're supposed to immediately turn them out onto a cooling rack, but I do not have a cooling rack, so this is how I do it. I just stick them in my toaster oven like this and just crack the door so they're not, so air can get in there. And then you just slice them once they're fully cooled. Mine weren't actually completely cooled, but I couldn't stand it anymore. They smelled amazing. So I went ahead and started to slice them up. So you can see what they look like. They are beautiful pieces of bread. They hold together nicely. They make a great sandwich. They make wonderful toast. I really want to make French toast out of it sometime soon. So I'll let you know if I do, if that turns out. You just slice it up with a bread knife. And then I put them in a gallon-sized Ziploc bag. That size loaf pan fits perfectly in a gallon Ziploc bag. And you can kind of squeeze the air out. And they will keep for a few days. Or if you're going to freeze them, it does freeze well. You can go ahead and slice it like this, put it in the bag, and stick it in the freezer. And then you can just thaw them like normal. Excuse the Band-Aid on my thumb. I accidentally hit my thumbnail or my knuckle on the wire shelf of the pantry and took a chunk out of my thumbnail. So that was painful. So just ignore the Band-Aid. So yeah, that's how I do that. That's how I store it, and it is so yummy. Try to get all the air out so it doesn't get stale, and just store it like that. Okay, so that's it. This is what it looks like when it's done. Just looks like sandwich bread. It is soft, it is fluffy, it's really yummy, especially right when you first make it. It'll last a couple of days as long as you keep it airtight in that bag, and it makes really good toast. So I hope you enjoy this. See, and 6 ingredients, and it makes 2 of those loaves. So you could either do 2 of the small loaves like this, or if you have one of those great big long loaf pans, you could just do all one big loaf. Either way, however you want to do it. But I just do the 2 smaller ones, and then we can go through it a little easier that way. And then we can also freeze 1 loaf while we eat on one, and then thaw it out. It thaws easily. It's not crummy or anything. Tender and yummy. So try it. I hope you like it. That's going to do it for this video. We'll see you in the next one. Happy baking. Love you. Bye.